Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
Yeah.
Hello.
So, hello. Howdy.
Howdy. What you been up to?
One day, abso-fucking-lutely nothing. That's the worst question to ask. Our show has many rough starts, but if you want them to be the roughest, be like, hey, what's new? Be like,
nothing.
Not a thing.
You know what? Fuck you. You just hang up.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Nothing's going on. Work was supposed to be done for this show to have a topic together, and that did not happen. Because nothing was going on. I was committed to that.
Yeah.
I said I was going to chase that feeling. No, it's just been super fucking busy and hectic.
It's because nobody warns you as a kid. Like, growing up, I can't wait to be an adult. I get to do whatever I want. And that's everybody talks about how much of a fucking lie that is.
Yeah, you get to do
but
less.
What people don't warn you about is how, like I said, if you say what's new or what's up with you or what's going on, I honestly cannot fucking answer that question because nothing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm so goddamn busy that I was just thinking about it. I sat down for 20 minutes before I came downstairs to get ready to record the show. That's the only 20 minutes of my day today that I haven't been doing something that I don't want to do. Like work or making
if you're doing the
breakfast
math.
Yeah. Well, it stood out to me that it's one of those days. So that's my point. It's like nothing exciting is going on yet. You have absolutely zero time to not do shit. Mm-hmm. It's like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, the ratios for our lives have been drastically fucked by the machine.
And they're trying to make these ridiculous, like, op-ed New York Times pushes to be like, don't you think it's about time we start working people more? Yeah. It's like, fuck you.
If you look back in the 1920s, they actually worked a lot harder. It's like there were 1920s idiots. Like, they weren't happy. Like, yeah.
And it's patently false, but they want to push that narrative. And there are times in history they did used to work a lot of times where society as a whole worked 6 days a week. And then the only reason they didn't work 7 is because on the 7th day they spent the whole day at church. And do you know what happened with those societies?
They crumbled under my feet.
Burnt to the ground because people were like, fuck this. Like, yeah, it wasn't like it was some utopia. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the people in charge are very quick to forget what happens when you push people too far. Yeah.
I've read this, and we might have even talked about this a few times on this show, but really, like, where American society has just fallen apart is we have all this, like, technology and all these advances to make life easier, but we still hold every individual person to the same work standard as if we don't have those advances. So, like, economically, we're still on the hook for the same amount of productivity, but we have other shit doing our jobs for us, and it's not necessary anymore. So it's really cool, and I'm not bitter at all about it. And yeah, the fuck it.
Nope.
Let's just keep, like, can we make it an 8-day work week? No, fuck this. So I didn't have a topic for the show this week. If you haven't listened to our show before, every week we tell each other stories, and they can be anything, and I can steal them from creepypasta.fandom.com, and that is still playing by the rules of this show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's in fact, I think I feel more like I'm breaking the rules of the show when I do an actual topic. Yeah. like, that's not what this is.
Yeah. No.
It's not true to the spirit of my soul when I put actual effort into anything.
I do. I feel like I've been phoning it in the last couple months when I think I only had like one creepypasta in the last couple, and that's not me. That's not who I am.
I'm sorry. I need to apologize to the public at large. That's not. I was trying to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
And I think that came through in the recording. And
we've gotten some emails about my insincerity. And you're right. Who I am is I'm a thief. I'm a worm.
I love the idea of getting like hate mail because we've made it. You pointed it out last week. I think it's like my self-esteem's at a point where you'd be like, "You're the biggest piece of shit I've ever heard," and it wouldn't like I wouldn't be like, "Oh man, I can't believe we got." I'd be like, "Yeah,
wow,
right." Like, I already feel that way. So thanks.
He finished the episode with that criticism.
And we talked about it because, true to God, I think it makes me more uncomfortable. And a hate mail. I'm joking because nobody likes to get like chewed out, but it definitely makes me more uncomfortable if you got something to be like, "Oh man, I just love your show so much." I'm like, what the fuck do I do with that? I can't internalize that.
Yeah.
Like,
my brain. I can. I love praise. Outwardly, I'll be like, "Oh shucks," but inwardly, it's like, "Fuck yeah, man, I'm the king."
Yeah, you got a little praise kink going on there. I won't shame it.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
I do not. I don't.
Tell me what you like best about me as I light these candles. So today...
this week's episode brought to you by Vaseline.
Yeah. Well, that's always the case.
Yeah.
I jump in a tub of it before we do the show.
I like to think you do the show from a tub of Vaseline. You're just sitting in there like squelching and...
That's a gross word in the context.
I know. It's not a great word in any context, but
I'm just squelching in my grease tub. So this story is by a user named CynicalSloth. We might have done some, but it's hard to keep track.
That might be us. I mean, that's a very like
CynicalSloth. If you ever hear this, can you write in and tell me if I'm you? Now this is a story called Eric Floc's Sad Men, and it's broken into chapters, but they're not very long.
Boy,
which I appreciate. So, 1. Eric Floc was a sad man. He was so very sad that flowers would wilt in his presence. Birds would cease to brighten the mornings with their chirping, and the sun seemed to dim and hide its glowing face behind a cloud at the mere mention of his name. Which,
I know, I'm liking how this is starting. I really...
I would you look for that, though? Like, how long do you think it would be before you notice? Like, you notice the sun disappears every time you come up in conversation?
I think that one would be the most noticeable because it's very obvious when the world goes dark. But like the bird thing,
that would be great. Birds are loud in the morning. They need to shut the fuck up.
I'm curious how close they let you get before they get quiet. Like maybe you don't even know what's going on. You just don't think. You're like, has anybody noticed a weird absence of birds? And everybody's like, no.
So I'm pretty much at this point. I'm imagining Strong Sad. From Homestar Runner.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. Eric Floc was a very, very sad man. Eric was not a clever man. He was not a rich man. He was not a handsome man. Now, in his mid to late 40s, with hair already receded halfway over his shining dome, Eric Floc had not accomplished a great deal in his life. In mid to late 40s, I don't think is too late or too early to like have a receded hairline.
Oh shit, I had a roommate in college that had a noticeably receding hairline, and we would have been 20. I think he turned 21 while I was out there, but
so to be in like your mid to late 40s and like already grays, it's like you're kind of old. Just own it. No wonder you're sad. You think you're fucking 25 forever.
Again, you're between the story and you're describing me.
He'd had a good crack at learning the saxophone a few years ago. There's no way to quicker like become sad than to try to learn the saxophone. I played saxophone
in school, so yeah,
it's tough. Yeah. Like that's a tough instrument to just jump in raw, In
middle school is when my school started offering, the band at, like the school bands. And of course my mom wanted me to do that and pushed me into saxophone. I don't know why, if she thought that was a cool instrument or something. I hated it. And I was 1,000% one of those people. Every time that they'd have like a concert or band, or even in class, I don't even remember if it was like during school or you went after school. I don't know. It lasted 1 year, and I remember distinctly like twice we had like recitals, but it was like the whole band, and I just like did the finger thing where you try to look like you're playing, but I definitely was not blowing into it. Yeah. Like
you just try to mimic like what you do with your lips and shit.
Yeah.
So he'd had a good crack at learning the saxophone a few years ago, but this idea eventually fizzled out of reality when the landlady of his apartment, Mrs. Fertz, told him in rather explicit terms that I shall henceforth censor, lest I spoil your youthful innocence. Except I'm not. He censors it, or they censor it with stars and stuff. I'm just gonna say it because this is an adult show for big boys.
Fuck yeah, it is, bitch.
I'm about to light your ears the fuck up. That if he didn't fucking shut up with that fucking saxophone phone, she was going to, and I quote, fucking Roger him with said instrument. Understandably, Eric took this to imply that his musical career was destined to languish in insignificance, as he rather preferred himself unrogered. Every morning he would wake up at exactly 6:30 a.m., trudge to the kitchen of his one-bedroom apartment, and pour himself a bowl of Marlon Brandos. Widely regarded as the saddest and most pathetic of all the celebrity-endorsed brand-based looped cereals.
That tracks.
I like this story already.
I know.
This is pretty great.
It's won me over quickly.
Before leaving his apartment to once more engage in the never-ending futile grind of his tedious job. To be most definitely sure, a sadder man you shall never know. And that is why you will find the events that transpired on the 28th of November, 1994, will prove to be most interesting. Most interesting indeed. 2. It was a Monday, a drizzly Monday. Monday the 28th of November, 1994 to be precise. The gray precipitation-laden clouds hung limply over the sky, a hat of misfortune upon the downtrodden head of misery. Eric Floc awoke, 6:30 a.m., trudged to the kitchen, bowl of Marlon Brandos, off to work. He worked at Johnson, Johnson, and McMillantonstone solicitors. Wow. This is great. JJ&M had a nationwide reputation. They were, for all intents and purposes, the laughingstock of the financial system. Eric was one of the prosecution attorneys and had garnered quite a reputation for himself. He was weak, ineffectual, with a tendency to fumble the easiest, most straightforward of cases in a truly spectacular fashion. Serial killers, drug overlords, and even a well-respected government official found in a hotel room snorting crack cocaine with 24 Korean hookers were all let off the hook thanks to Eric's sheer incompetence. It was truly spectacular to watch him fail. I think the last guy, if you got 24 Korean hookers, anyone will let that slide. Just for the sheer clown car volume of people you're snorting crack cocaine with, that's an achievement.
Yeah.
That is 24 Korean hookers, man. In a hotel.
My mind goes to the logistics of it. How did you get them there? A couple buses? I guess one bus could fit 24 hookers.
Yeah.
Not 25 though. 24 is the limit on a
Imagine being the bellboy at that hotel. You're just like watching one after another go in.
Well, at least they don't have any bags to carry up, I guess.
It's like, and the government official, like, if this was something that could go to trial, way to hide it, dude.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, there's no way to be discreet about that.
No. Yeah, that's just like, hi, I'm your elected official, and 24 of my closest friends are coming.
We'll be checking into this hotel. They may or may not be wearing much clothes when they come in. It's a cultural thing. Do not mention it.
They may be what you call the people of the night.
If you see any packages of white powder, they fell out of my pockets, please deliver them to my room post-haste.
Eric's Monday had been fairly standard, as Eric's Mondays go. Missed his bus, drenched by a passing car as he waited at the bus stop for the next one, verbally accosted during his 40-minute commute by a raving drunk he knew only as Mad Gerald, and inevitably left his lunch at home on the kitchen table.
God damn, that's the worst. I've done that.
Yeah. With a heavy sigh, Eric Floc slumped into his small broken chair at his small dusty desk in his small dingy office with his small withered ficus. A bulging red-cheeked face appeared at the door. It was the lead attorney. Eric's boss, Mr. Montgomery Charles McMillington Stone.
Damn, he got the wrong boss.
A preposterously gargantuan man, magnanimous in aura, regal in accent, prolific in body odor. This is so fucking well written.
I know.
I love this, dude. Congratulations, Mr. Floc. The booming voice reverberated through the office walls. Eric eyed the picture of a smiling cat that was suspended from the adjacent wall, quietly wondering to himself whether or not Mr. McMillington Stone's voice was sufficiently boisterous enough so as to cause the nail on which the picture hung precariously to work itself loose from the wall, sending the picture tumbling to its inexorable end. Eric snapped his head back to the man who, in stepping towards his desk, waves of body fat undulating across his abdomen like the swells of the ocean, had derailed his train of thought.
I suddenly identify with a new character in this story.
Mr. McMillington Stone continued, Congratulations on becoming the first ever of our attorneys to go an entire year without winning a single case. That is truly a remarkable achievement. Eric's eyes fell to his desk and his shoulders slumped. Goodness gracious, man, you're pathetic. You've got a week to ship up or ship out.
I like that that's their line. You lose every case for 51 weeks, that's okay. Yeah. But after 52, you're...
But that is how I imagine a dude named McMillington Stone would talk.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Dr. Seuss fucking capitalist analogy. Mr. McMillington Stone turned with a sneer and stomped from the office with elephantine elegance, slamming the thin wooden door behind him. The picture frame fell and smashed. And that, boys and girls, was that. Poor old Eric, poor old sad, dejected Eric, simply snapped. Eric's office window was wide open. He felt the breeze ruffle the last remaining tufts of hair on his head, and as he fell, he smiled. Thud. And Eric Floc was sad no more. 3. Mr. McMillington Stone woke in a cold sweat. He flustered and blustered and huffed and wheezed as he attempted to hoist his immense form into a relatively upright position in his bed, much like a tortoise rendered helpless when turned over onto its shell.
Or Steve on a Monday.
Or just Ben after anything.
Right.
The wooden bed frame creaked, threatening to cast the large man into a sweaty, flummoxed heap upon the floor. Once he was in a somewhat vertical position, he reached for his spectacles. Tiny little pea-sized bifocals that only served to accentuate the vastness of his perpetually rosy face, and flicked on the small bedside lamp that sat forlornly on the dusty cabinet. Stood completely in shadow at the base of his bed was a figure. "What the devil?" bellowed Mr. McMillington Stone. He twisted the lamp towards the base of his bed, but it seemed that the more light that fell upon the shadow, the darker it became. "Who are you? State your business." Such a proper...
I know.
To an intruder.
I love that. I love that, yeah. And I've seen real life stories like that where somebody comes, there's a fine line there because I get a lot of we've seen a lot of stories where people like mistakenly, maybe drunk or it's hard to mistakenly enter the wrong house, but it happens. Mm-hmm. And then, or like the ones that we had a rash of them last year where it's just like somebody knocks on the door for directions and gets shot through the door.
Yeah.
So that's obviously too extreme with the one end, but I've had these stories too where like people either mistakenly come in or like it's a home invasion. It's like, what are you doing in my house? Like, don't, at this point, yeah. Proper questions are where I feel like the proper response to these situations is somewhere in between these two responses.
Yeah.
Like, but I like it because it fits the character. This character is very well fleshed out. Yeah. If you'll excuse the pun.
I just imagine a guy who goes to bed with like a bow tie on.
Yeah. Excuse me while I change into my night suit.
Let me get something more comfortable on and you just change your suit. State your business, thundered the perspiring blob that wobbled with each word uttered from his drooling maw. The figure approached. The light from the lamp caught the glimmer of a blade. His death was slow and painful. His vocal cords were slashed, so he could only wheeze and gasp in agony as the figure cut into his flesh. 4. Lyndon West locked up his office, whistling merrily to himself. It had been a very, very good month. First off, that sad sack Eric finally stopped being a waste of an office and jumped ship, literally. Second, that gelatinous glob of pompous arrogance had finally met a well-deserved end at the hands of some twisted criminal. Well, so Lyndon West already like establishing himself.
He's
as the worst person,
he's like,
you know?
I've been trying to work my way up the ladder for years, and suddenly
finally a serial killer.
Although it's funny too, it's like finally that guy that's never won a case is out of my way.
Yeah, like how bad were you if you couldn't beat the worst lawyer in the world?
Right.
One step closer to that management position, he thought to himself. Soon it will be Johnson, Johnson, and West. Dean Tin. Stone. That would be great if they named him partner, but insist he change his name to something.
Yeah, but like that's Johnson, Johnson, and West. Just that's not, that doesn't roll off the tongue like a load of rocks.
We were thinking of changing the name to Cooper, and Cooper.
I like that.
It had a certain ring to it. He trotted merrily through the hallway, past the front desk, waving jovially at Marcy, the receptionist, who regarded his apparent joy at the death of 2 colleagues with a look of distaste, through the double doors that served as the main entrance to JJ&M, and carefully across the road to his car. He had worked late that night, so dusk had begun to drape its deep blue cover across the sky, snuffing out the sun and moon, and leaving only the ever-so-faint twinkle of stars for celestial decoration. Lyndon beeped the beeper, and his car clicked open. He opened the driver's side door, flung his briefcase inside with glee, and flung himself into the seat, closing the door and sliding into place in one fluid motion. He slid his key into the ignition and turned. The radio burst into life. Swing music. Perfect, thought Lyndon as he bopped along to the big band sound. He continued turning the key, waiting for the engine to jump into life, but nothing happened. Still bopping and scatting, rather terribly if I'm honest, he flounced back out of the car and towards the bonnet. Probably a loose spark plug or something. He popped the bonnet catch and propped it open. Inside the engine, a dead bird was wedged firmly into one of the cylinders, its head seemingly crushed by one of the pistons. Maggots writhed in the fleshy pulp that oozed from the side of the decaying creature. Lyndon,
I hate when that happens.
Yeah. It's a common problem. You got dead shit in your fucking cylinders, man. Lyndon retched and flicked the bonnet hood down, letting the bonnet close with a loud crash. He grumbled to himself and traipsed around to the driver's seat, muttering and moaning to himself. He flopped back down and fumbled the glove box open in search of the little business card his mechanic had given him.
I love this image of this guy that's just such a, like...
prick.
Oh, I'm glad these two people are dead. I'm pissed off about my car. But he also has some kind of condition where he can't stop scatting and popping and flouncing. Like, at first I thought it was just his preference in music, but I'm starting to think it's like some kind of handicap that he has. Some kind of, he got hit in the head with a baseball as a kid, and that's part of his personality.
Oh, gross. Quick phone call, and I'm sure he'd have it sorted. Important businessmen like me don't go around moving filthy dead animals. Neither do mechanics, technically.
Yeah, that's not... Well, I don't know. That's a tricky one, because dead animals aren't within mechanic, but getting a car to run is, like... I don't know.
If you call me, like, if it's already in the car, you bring it to the shop, it's like, okay. But if you, like, wake me up at, like, after hours, be like, there's a dead bird in my hood. It's like, tough shit. You know, grab a paper towel and pretend to be a claw machine, I guess.
That's another fun thing about being an adult. Maybe as a kid, but I never had to think about it as a kid. But the amount of, like, dead animals I've come across, like, just randomly in my yard. There was a bird this summer that must have, like, ran into one of my windows. Just neck snapped, and then the rabbit that the raccoons fucking ripped to pieces, because I didn't realize raccoons were that goddamn vicious.
Yeah, they're monsters.
Like,
they're terrors.
Then the snake that I hit with a weed whacker, because I'd not on purpose. It's cutting weeds down, and the snake, like, it's startled in it. I think it probably tried to
weed down in the game of nature.
So and it's funny because we have a nice, tall, like, privacy fence, and it backs up off onto, like, a commercial property. There's, like, a parking lot, but there's, I don't know, 10 feet of just, like, unmowed whatever between us and them. Mm-hmm. And so every time I come across a dead animal, now it's just like dump it over my fence towards them. It's like, no, it's on your side. And it's not like it's dumping it, because it's technically dumping it onto my own property still, but it's like, no, I don't have to see it. And again, to point out, I'm not a complete...
By the, like, 5 years from now, it's going to form into, like, a weird fucking moat of dead animals.
Yeah. Because I'm over here assuming that they're getting, like, picked off by, like, scavengers or decomposing. They're probably not. Yeah. There's just a pile of... And they're all different. Like, there's... The police are going to show up and be like, son, why are there rabbit pieces, a dead snake, and a bird? And then we'll add, we get groundhogs, so somehow a groundhog's going to die. There's just be this, like, Noah's Ark of dead animals behind my house.
All this week, anyway. I've been watching, like, all those old, like, Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe movies, which are really great. But all of them, like, always start with, like, a spooky house, and him, like, Vincent Price being like, you must have noticed the death as you came in, like, and that's gonna be you. Like, 10 years. But you're just telling, like, the pizza guy, like, you must have noticed all the land has been torn asunder by death's hand.
I'll be out front on the porch screaming that at joggers as they go by. Bet you noticed the death, didn't you? See you tomorrow, neighbor.
Alrighty, so Lyndon's like, okay, I'm going to call my mechanic. Poor Lyndon West. If only he had taken a moment to check the back seat. Maybe he would have seen the shadowy figure that had slipped quietly into the back seat when he was checking the engine. The knife pierced his skin just below his Adam's apple, pinning him to the back of the chair, gagging on his own blood. The figure drew another knife and continued cutting.
I know that wasn't a funny line, except for I'm picturing him gagging on his butt, but still scatting.
Bopping.
I should have been happening.
5. The doctors and investigators were baffled. A double homicide, both victims with extensive damage to the throat and neck. Lacerations across the entire body and face. No signs of any struggle at either crime scenes. No fingerprints, DNA samples, or clothing fibers. Any possible leads, Dr. Ramirez? Something for my boys to go on? Asked Officer Daughtry, A worried expression played across his brow. He removed his patrolman's cap and brushed some imaginary lint from the peak. Nothing. Not a microbe. I've scoured every inch of these cadavers and nothing. The criminal was either exceedingly clever or somehow able to perfectly remove all biological evidence of his presence. The doctor dug his hands deep into his pocket thoughtfully. Ugh, grunted Daughtry. Right, well, thanks anyway, Doc. Call the station if you get anything. Anything, okay? The doctor nodded and the officer left. Ramirez sighed and surveyed the two corpses, lying on medical gurneys side by side, which is always cool if like you're a part of like a serial killer like victim thing. It's like a little brotherhood. They keep you together. You have a friend in the afterlife. Friend.
Yeah, I was just thinking though, it's interesting that they still had the first body because at that point they wouldn't have suspected any connection.
They would probably keep the body for a murder though.
For a little while. I mean, it's not like they like preserve it and just leave it sitting in a room until the murder's solved. But then I was just thinking what it tracks because given the description of that first Westinghouse Stonington mill or whatever.
Bivelton Shillville Esquire.
They're probably still digging the hole, so probably.
Yeah, we didn't actually have any room in the cemetery for this.
Yeah. The Undertaker's just over there, still grumbling away, son of a bitch.
We are talking about a absurdly cartoonish gargantuan man who shook the very building he helped build.
Right.
He removed a large bundle of keys from his lab coat pocket and fumbled through them, searching for the keys to the cadaver storage cabinets. The hefty bundle wriggled free from his grip and tumbled towards the cold, polished floor, landing with a metallic rattle that echoed through the lab. Ramirez cursed under his breath and squatted down to fetch the bunch. He grasped the key ring and straightened. He froze. It was suddenly so cold. He moved to reach for the thermostat that rested by the door, but found his legs wouldn't respond. He tried to say but discovered his larynx appeared to have seized up as well. He strained to reach his left arm up to his throat. He felt the tip of the blade protruding half an inch or so from his skin. He stumbled forwards, eyes streaming with pain, unable to call for help. Blood pooled in the base of his throat, making him choke and heave violently. He collapsed backwards onto the third gurney that sat beside the two containing the corpses of Mr. McMillington Stone and Mr. West. As his life ebbed away from him, Ramirez saw a figure lean over his body. His eyes closed, and he was dead. 6.
Well, that just seems unfair, because that guy had nothing to do with the...
Yeah.
The sadness of the killer. Like, yeah, it's just like, fuck you for investigating this.
Oh,
ciao.
It sucks, but unfortunately the serial killer's not the hero of the story. I was shocked too. 6. Officer Daughtry approached his squad car and patted himself down. For some reason, I took that like the cop way. It was like, it's like.
Do you have any objects in your pocket that might stab me or hurt me?
I'm under arrest.
I have the right to remain silent if I don't want to talk to my... Yeah.
And patted himself down, searching for the keys. He swore angrily under his breath and turned back to the station. Must have left him in the doc's office. He trudged down the cold staircase that led to the lab, situated underneath the police HQ itself. He approached the blue double doors and swung them open. Hey, Doc, I think I left... The doctor lay on his back on a gurney, now part of a macabre trio of bodies that were lined up on one side of the lab. Blood had dripped from the gurney into a large pool that had slowly flown across the floor to the drainage grate in the center of the floor. Daughtry walked slowly towards the 3 corpses, his knees weak and shaking, and his brow now awash with sweat.
I thought he was going to like count a couple times, like, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Hey, Doc, how many dead people were here? His sidearm was quickly in his hand, and he scanned the lab frantically to ensure the perpetrator of this crime was not still at the scene. But he saw nothing. As the building was underground, there were no windows to escape from, the only light source being a few banks of fluorescent lights that hung a few feet from the ceiling on chains. The bodies had been completely mutilated. Their eyes had been carefully, almost surgically removed. Their mouths had been delicately carved, a single pristine slit, ear to ear, making all three corpses look as if they were smiling, an agonizing, bloody smile. Etched meticulously into the forehead of each disfigured face was one word: sad. Epilogue. The apartment building was quiet now, save for the slow, repetitive crunch of cereals being masticated pensively. The man finished his cereal and sat the empty bowl down next to the box of Marlon Brandos. He crossed his legs and began to peruse the newspaper. The headline read, "The Sad Man Killer Strikes Again. Death count now at 14. And Eric Floc, poor old sad Eric Floc, smiled. The end.
That was probably the best written creepypasta.
Yeah.
Really just the best overall. I really, really like the story, the plot.
Yeah. Not even, and this is literally, I've done it before, but this is literally, I picked a random story right before doing the show. I had no idea what this was about. That's not just the best creepypasta we've read on this show. That's probably the best I've read ever in terms of like writing quality.
Oh, the writing quality, it had me suspicious that it was like not an actual author that was just like doing this for fun. Like,
yeah.
Well, I say that's mean. Anybody that writes a story is an actual author, but you know what I mean? Like a professional,
but,
like
yeah, there was
a practiced author.
Yeah. Like the language flowed beautifully in that. And
I did feel like, and this might have been an intentional thing. As the killing part ramped up, some of that like very, very clever, very like prosy writing kind of disappeared, and it got a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I almost took that in kind of a way where like, especially a lot of like more modern horror movies kind of do this thing where they're almost more set up as different movies. So in a lot of ways, like this started out, and in my head, it was almost like a dark comedy. But if it, if it were a movie, it would get like suddenly like, this is just a straight up horror slasher now.
Right. And that's what I say. It may have been an intentional choice, and that's because it's not a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. But the tone shifted. It's not good. Yeah.
Right. And the writing style kind of shifted too.
Yeah.
And it was noticeable. And like I said, so if it was on purpose, and it fits, like if it was on purpose, it shifted at an appropriate point. And it kind of made that scene, because like you said, when in the beginning, really the first half of the story, I was picturing something, and a lot of this, because I don't know if the author's British, but clearly the writing style, the humor, and the words and the slang and stuff, and it seemed to take place over in England. But I was picturing something like Hot Fuzz, or what is that? Shaun of the Dead or something.
Yeah,
like that kind of like comedy, but the quirky, like the loser protagonist.
And that's like a really great analogy to like sort of those movies, because those movies start as comedies, and then they're still funny by the end of them, but they're unapologetically about embracing the genre they've been spoofing up until then. So like Hot Fuzz becomes a full-blown fucking action movie by the end, and there's still like humor and callbacks in it, but the tone is like kind of that jarring. And Shaun of the Dead, I think also, like that starts as a zombie parody, and then by the end it's a zombie survival movie. And I would be shocked to find out that those weren't inspirations for this style, not necessarily the story itself, but for this style. Although it's funny too, because the way that the character worked, the way that they described the characters was fantastic. It really painted that
like almost Lemony Snicket. You said Dr. Seuss, that like very vivid but caricature-esque, like you never once believed that these are real, believable humans, but that's the point.
Like they're very cartoonish, and that's why I'm kind of like visualizing it as a movie in my head a little bit, because it's like they're these over the top characters, and then as this character becomes a serial killer, it's almost like he's leaving his world and entering actual reality, where like cops and doctors are like, what the fuck? But it's still this like cartoonish man from this cartoonish world, but he's like fucking sick and evil.
Like I'd go so far as to say too, like as I was imagining these characters in the beginning, like I was even imagining them, if this makes any sense, in that almost like wide angle lens, like high like perspective from a movie like Matilda. If you've seen the original Matilda with Danny DeVito, and how and it's shot on purpose is to give the characters that extra like caricature-esque perspective, and it's just something very little that you may not even think about, but but that's how I'm like even mentally picturing these characters. Like you can set it up almost shot for shot like a movie opening, so it was very, very good.
I'm like imagining him almost like Christopher Lloyd in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when like his cartoony eyes like bug out and shit. But it's almost like that guy meets, like, if the story kept going, it would be like that guy meets like True Detective. And that is kind of something I want to see a little bit. I
had a lot of things I like. There was a couple parts where I felt like it was being too but I don't know. This feels like it's super nitpicky because it seems like unfair to even bring up, because it's like it's still the parts I felt tried too hard. The one part where it was talking about dusk hung over like a whatever with celestial, like it felt a little too forced, trying to be a little wordy, but it was still better than what I would ever do. But on the flip side, it did a few things. I almost like interrupted at one point to point this out, but at the beginning when they're describing, this is turning into like a literary, like how to write like workshop podcast. We do this a lot on these creepypastas, especially good ones that we like. But anyway, one of the things that I know as a writer, but I can't do, or I'm not good at doing because I'm not practiced enough, especially when you're trying to set that comedic tone. In the very beginning, when he's describing the protagonist, he doesn't say he's ugly, he's unsuccessful, he's this. He says he's not handsome, he's not successful. And I had learned that trick. It's way more interesting, instead of just to bluntly say like this person's short, you say, well, this person's not tall.
He ain't tall.
And especially when you strung them together, he had like 3 or 4 descriptors there, but they were all, he was not smart, he was not handsome, he was not successful. It really paints this like, it makes it that much more poignant. And that was the moment, and that was very early in the story that I'm like, holy shit, this is pretty well written.
There's like a drawing technique, and you might know what it's called. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's like when you're drawing essentially by erasing.
Yeah, the negative space.
Yeah, and that's kind of the writing equivalent of it, is like if you tell people like what a character is not, your imagination does a lot of the heavy lifting for the writing. And
it's like I said, it's a simple trick, but I never think of it, and I'm bad at using it. But when you use it, it just makes it more interesting, because it's easy to say like, oh, this main character had a dirty face and a pig nose and a, whatever. And it's like, yeah, that paints a picture, but it's way more interesting when you, so it just, I don't know. That's a lot of words for me to say. I very much like the style of this. Very good. But it was very very apparent early on that I made the joke that, CynicalSloth, that describes it. Sure as fuck doesn't describe me. I'm very clear now by the end of the story that I didn't write this.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, like I said, that is a legit fucking story.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for wasting it with, fair use on our fucking dumb shit.
I was just about to say, it feels, most of the time you read these and you're like, and again, we'll bag on things, sometimes the story or the writing style, but in fun. But they all feel like free story. It kind of feels like we got away with something reading this.
We took something that didn't belong to us. Yeah, like I was gonna say, like, I feel bad after a lot of these when we do tease the writing, and it is meant to be good natured and not like discouraging or shitting on people. Because these are stories that are supposed to be fun. This is one where I feel bad because like I don't know if we're really worthy.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it does that thing too, where it's like, man, I'm so excited about the story and how good it was, but it also makes me feel bad about how bad I am at writing them.
Yeah.
Well, back to the drawing board, Steve.
Like I really need to work on my Mr. McMillington Billington, the Five-a-Ville voice, because if I had known he was going to be such a memorable character, I would have practiced for a week.
Yeah. I was going to say, and that's about a guarantee, this story now, that within the next couple episodes that I'm going to have to try writing something original too, because that's what you do too, where you're like, man, that's so good, I have to try that, and then you do it and you're like, fuck, why did I? It's like I've been practicing sketching because I've been having a lot of time stuck on phones and just a lot of like stress at work, and that's one of the things that's like, if I can take like 5 or 10 minutes to just sit and sketch, just to like kind of like
get a break,
because I don't. Yeah, because I don't. My job, and it's not like this isn't fuck the man, because they have to do that. I work for myself, but that means I don't tend to take like 15-minute breaks every 2 hours or whatever it is. So if I stop for 5 or 10 minutes to draw, just to blow off some steam, that's me taking a break. But I'll do that because I'll like Google like how to sketch, and you find these artists and you're like, oh man, that's so good, it's inspiring, I can do that, and then you draw and you're like, I can't do that. But that's a long way for me to say this is kind of an inspiring story too. It makes you want to write, to try that, but at least for me. But
yeah,
very good. And I'm a little pissed that you picked it randomly and you got this. When I pick it randomly, there's a long history. We've got a good record of what happens when I pick random stories.
Well, if you want my secret to a great random creepypasta, find it on.
Do it enough times.
Find it on your phone while you're on the toilet, because that's what happened here.
Yeah. That one ups me. Where last week I was literally working on notes to the show while sitting at my daughter's swim lesson, like writing them on my phone, which is fucking awful. I hate writing anything of substance on a phone.
Yeah. It's like David Lynch. You sounded a little bit like him when he has a rant you can find on YouTube that's just like a few seconds, but he's like, the fact that you think you watched a full movie on your fucking telephone, it's like, it's a disgrace.
Oh, I've heard about that, and that's bullshit. I've watched a lot of shows and movies on my phone.
You think you watched it. That's the whole rant. It's like, you might have think you watched a whole movie, but you have no idea what that movie actually was.
Those people, I guess I'm familiar with that because I barely know who David Lynch is.
He made
other
Twin
than
Peaks and shit.
Yeah. That's the one thing, but I know shit about Twin Peaks because the one time I tried to watch it, it was like, what the fuck is this?
Me and my brother have an ongoing dispute on whether or not that is actually a good show. And
it's not.
It's bad. It sucks. And you make a lot of enemies on the internet when you say so, but fuck that shit. Yeah. Like, it way to set up an interesting mystery and then dick around with a bunch of fucking high school love drama bullshit.
But what I'll give those people, they're not wrong. It is a totally different experience to watch a movie on your phone or watch it on your TV or watch it in a theater. Those are all different experiences.
Yeah.
What they fail to understand, they might prefer one of those three. I fucking don't. I prefer a different one. Like, it doesn't make it wrong or that you didn't watch it. to me, the comfort of watching something wherever the fuck I want, where I can pause it and like whatever, outweighs seeing it on a big screen where I can't do any of that stuff.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like
and
the
that's
movies
not to say
I've
I don't
watched
like
this year. Like, I went to John Wick 4 in theaters, and it's cool to see certain movies as like an event, you know? And I can rewatch John Wick 4 and it's a fucking brilliant movie. It's a perfect movie in my opinion. But you know, it won't be the same as like, you know, the movie just came out and we're all there and like the action scenes are fresh and shit. At the same time, it's like I watched that new Ninja Turtles movie on my computer. Like, you know, it became like it became like theater at home to buy, and I fucking loved that movie too. And not seeing it in theater didn't like hurt that for me. I was still appreciating the visuals and stuff, and I don't know. Like I enjoy going to the movies occasionally, but to me it's like you can absorb a movie and appreciate a movie on a smaller screen.
Unless you're the psychopath that was on the flight back from Florida last year that was watching a movie on their cell phone, but holding the cell phone like vertical and like yeah. That doesn't count. Those people need to go to jail. It wasn't that she was doing anything else. It wasn't like they had it in like a window, but were like reading, you had like split screen. No, they were just watching it vertical. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Like, I will say that is probably my line, is I wouldn't watch like a full movie.
Well, it just doesn't make sense when you can. Like I have, but when I watch them at work, or I watched a handful of movies.
I would play the audio of a movie, but I wouldn't be actively watching a movie on my phone, which is fine too.
When we were in the hospital waiting for Lincoln to be born, I watched like 4 movies, including Pulp Fiction for the first time. It was fine. I mean, the movie is...
So that's your problem. You didn't actually... The fact that you think you saw Pulp Fiction on your fucking telephone...
I don't mean Pulp Fiction was fine. I liked it a lot. I mean, it was fine watching it on the phone. It didn't
Imagine how great it would have been if you put it on an actual screen.
The other one, though, that I watched... I know there was more than these 2, but the 2 that I remember were Pulp Fiction, and there was one called... God damn, I always forget. It was called something like An Upstanding Man or something like that. It was a dark comedy, barely even a comedy, but it was exactly kind of what this story that you just read to circle back to that.
Serious Man?
A Serious Man, yeah.
I fucking hate that movie.
Really?
Yeah,
I liked it.
I fucking hate that movie. It's like, that's Coen Brothers, I believe, and that is probably at the bottom for me of Coen Brothers movies. Because
it wasn't up there. I liked the vibe of it. It
just makes me miserable. And I think that's the point, but I don't want that. Like there are other movies that make me feel miserable, but in like interesting ways. And
it just kind of had that there was no happy ending to that movie.
Yeah, like
I think part
a serious
of it was
man could happen to me, and I don't like that.
Right.
You know?
That's what I think I had watched that one within a couple weeks of seeing, and I don't know how to say this the correct way. Maybe I am. The In Bruges, which is a fucking fantastic movie. But that's excellent. Yeah. But that's Colin
Farrell.
Farrell and
Brendan Gleeson.
The other dude. Yeah. I don't. Which, when they team up, the only other one I've seen with them together is Ghost of Inisherin, and that is fantastic.
Yeah, the Banshees of Inisherin.
Or Banshees of Inisherin, yeah.
Is a masterpiece. Absolutely.
Yeah. Fucking loved it. But like the other one too. But they're both movies that do not really have a happy point in them.
No.
At all. But I liked a Serious Man. Not anywhere near to that level, but that's unfair because those are two of the best movies in that kind of genre probably ever made. Two of the best actors for those kind of movies. Fantastic duo there.
Yeah.
Which isn't a secret. They've been nominated for a ton of. Although I don't think Banshees. I don't remember if it won any.
I don't think it won. I don't think it won any of the Academy ones.
No, it had some stiff competition, but it's also the kind of movie that gets fucked because it's not.
Because it's good.
Whatever. Yeah.
Because it's like well paced.
But it's one that they're like, yeah, but we can't. It doesn't have mainstream appeal. It's like because you don't push it mainstream. But
to be fair, I'm not. I watch a lot. I watch a lot of different types of movies from different eras, but I'm not like a cinema, purist or really that knowledgeable. And I'm the type of person who's like, best cinematography was that top down shot in John Wick 4 because it was like Hotline Miami. But that was awesome. It looked great. So yeah, that's the show this week. I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah, thank you. What was it,
CynicalSloth? Yeah,
for writing a great story that also gave us opportunity to bring up some other good works to compare it to.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm going to go to Creepypasta website tomorrow and see how many stories this person's written.
Yeah. Welcome to the CynicalSloth fan cast, where we just read their shit forever.
But right. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, listener, because
you ain't getting another one. All right. So we'll see you next week.